All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon as well. My name is Rachel Nunn. We're going to go ahead and start this second event in the Pacific Disaster Risk Knowledge Series. Great to have all of you here today. Thank you for making time as well. So at the moment, I'm currently in Sydney, so it's still the morning here. So I'm used to saying good morning, but good afternoon as well if you're joining from Fiji or Samoa or any of the other countries in the region that are in the afternoon at the moment. We're really glad to have all of you here, and it's been a while since our first event, but we're ready for our second event, looking at improving the use of risk data and information in the region. So thank you again and welcome. Just a few general housekeeping matters, please, to everybody on this call. We kindly ask that you use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask your questions ahead of time. If not, you're also welcome to use the chat function as well. Our panelists online will make every effort to answer these questions during the webinar. If for whatever reason we're not able to do so during the webinar, during this live session, we will compile a list of the answers and resources that best address your questions. So don't worry, we'll be sending more information as it becomes available. We will have a Zoom poll in the middle of this session today. So just something to sort of gauge your feedback and a little bit of insight into your understanding of risk data and information so far and the application, especially across the region. This session will be recorded and shared with all registrants following the end of the webinar. So please don't worry about taking too many notes. Please feel free to just relax and listen as you will, because we will be sharing the full recording following this webinar. All presentation materials, if applicable. So for example, if we have any slides from any of the presenters, these will also be shared with all registrants following the end of the webinar as well. So any material that is showcased during the webinar today will definitely be shared post-webinar as well. So just to give you a little bit of an insight into the Pacific Disaster Risk Knowledge Series, this has come about through a collaboration between the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, and the Pacific Communities GEM division as well. It has the overarching theme of strengthening the application of disaster and climate risk information in the Pacific. The series' core target audience are current and potential users of climate and disaster risk information or knowledge in Pacific Island countries. So all of you on this webinar today, thank you again for joining. The series will be a series of 3 online events. So this is the second of the third online event in 2025. Each event will be a maximum duration of 90 minutes. And we are targeting and planning for one in-person regional event, either in Q4 2025 or Q1 2026. The emphasis for these series is really to strengthen risk-informed decision-making. The knowledge series will explore the following key topics to help guide the generation and especially the application of disaster and climate risk insights. So really looking at understanding and the use of climate and disaster risk information, embedding climate and disaster risk assessments into policy, planning, and investment. I think we saw quite a bit of this in the first event, if you were also part of that as well. If you weren't part of the first event, I'd also just like to make a call out here. Please send us an email following this webinar. We're happy to also share the materials from the first event as well. Also looking at ownership, capacity, and institutionalization, access, data, and sharing. I think that especially applies to this event. Tailoring risk information to end users, and looking at the future application and innovation of such data and information across the region. So as mentioned, this is part of a series of events. The first event was held in August 2025. Then this was focused on understanding the risk information for resilient development. Excuse me. The second one, we're here today on the 1st of October, brand new month. The focus is on improving risk data and insights through access, tools, and innovation. Our third event will be in November with a date to be confirmed soon. And as mentioned earlier, we will have an in-person event as well. So as you can see with the diagram here on the right, we're really looking at having a progressively inclusive way to engage the users of risk data and information through these series and then through an in-person platform as well. So I'm really happy to introduce for this webinar. As mentioned, this is webinar number 2. The focus is improving the use of risk data and information. We'd really like to explore how Pacific-led innovations are transforming risk data into smarter, faster decisions for resilient development. So you would have seen from the first webinar that was really laying the foundation for this risk data and information. And now we're transitioning more into the innovation and the application of this risk data and information. So first off, we have on our screen here is Dana Connolly. So she's the Disaster Risk Financing Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. We have Orisi Naivalurua, who is the Project Implementation Officer at the Pacific Community. He's also online. We have John Strickland, who is the Director for the Emergency Management Cook Islands, Government of the Cook Islands. We have Christopher Saili, who is the Director for Kahuto Pacific. We have all of them online today, with the exception of Christopher, who is currently traveling. So he has sent us a pre-recorded message, which we will play at the appropriate time. He has also said that he welcomes any questions or comments about Kahuto Pacific or about the Moana data service that he will be discussing as well. And we'll put together those answers and resources and then circulate them with everybody who is here today. So apologies, let me go back to this. So with that, I would like to invite Dana Connolly from the Asian Development Bank, who is online today, to be able to give us some opening and welcoming remarks for this second event. Thank you, Dana, and over to you.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And it's lovely to be here with you all today. And I will try to keep my remarks short as I am by far the least exciting person on this panel. But it's lovely to see you here all today. Welcome to the second event, as Rachel said, in the Pacific Risk Knowledge series, which is really all about continuing the conversation on how Pacific-led innovations are really transforming risk data into not only smarter but faster decisions to ensure and enable resilient development, which is what is urgently required. Now, as we all know, probably too well, access to risk information is not just about having the data. Often we have the data, but we need to tackle the other barriers as well. And to name a few, that includes siloed systems, inconsistent formats, and limited local control. So we need to tackle these challenges and ultimately move towards a set of shared standards, good governance, and stronger local capacity, plus platforms like these to help us share ideas among colleagues. Now, we are also at a quite exciting moment, I would say, where emerging technology is evolving every day, and it's allowing us to build predictive models that combine in situ observations, remote sensing, and real-world local knowledge. So when these are grounded in the Pacific context, as they are needed to, these tools are really not just technical innovations. They become pathways to those more resilient communities when in the right hands. So they require more than just the technology. We need to also ensure that we have understanding of the context and needs of those end users, those people that will be using the data. We need to ensure that we're investing alongside this in the local and regional capacity to ensure we have sustainability. And also collaboration across the sectors, while also bringing in the private sector, who we all know that we need in this space as well. Now today, as Rachel has already mentioned, we have a really exciting range of speakers. First up, as I'm sure you all know, we have Orisi, who will talk about Integrate Pacifica a platform that strengthens access to training, knowledge products, applications, and technical support, ensuring Pacific specialists are really better equipped to advise decision makers on climate and disaster resilience. Following on, we have John Strickland, who will speak about the Cook Islands Emergency Management GIS initiative, which is really building on building a geoportal to provide citizens with open access to climate impact data from vulnerable coastlines to community resource management. And then Christopher, virtually, who will introduce us, or even more virtually, who will introduce us to the Moana Initiative, which is reimagining data stewardship. So managing geospatial information to empower safer and sustainable futures. Now, these stories are not just about data, they're really about ownership and Pacific leadership, which is really ultimate in this space. Now, I invite you all to listen carefully and engage in the conversation and reflect on the lessons and consider how you can bring some of these innovations into your own work. So I really hope you enjoy the session and leave inspired to develop your own solutions. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Dana, for those remarks. Thank you as well for highlighting emerging technologies as well in the region. I think one of the things that we found through this series is that there are quite a few, but it's just kind of hard to consolidate them all and to be able to share information around them. So that's one of the goals as well of this this series too, is to be able to shine the light on a few and to be able to keep gathering that database of Pacific-led innovation. So thank you so much as well for that. With that, we will be starting the panel discussion. So I do have online Orisi Naivalurua as well as John Strickland from the Cook Islands. So Orisi will be discussing Integrate Pacifica, and I'm sure he'll tell you a lot more about it with his intervention now. But Orisi, just to sort of guide you as well. So a couple of the questions that we have noted down for you so far is just really how Integrate Pacifica is helping or aims to help decision makers translate risk data into planning and/or policy action. If you could share a use case where peer learning, for example, directly influence a national or sectoral decision, we'd really like to hear more from you on that. Thank you, Orisi. Over to you.
Thank you, Rachel, and also Bula Binaka to everyone. It's great to see everyone online, and also thank you, Dana, for opening up our session today. It is indeed an honor also just to talk on some of the work, and I must probably before I start acknowledge as well, some of the things that I'll be sharing about was definitely led by the countries, that we were privileged to engage with, and those were 6 countries, with Cook Islands, Tonga, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands, and with the inclusion of Fiji as well, in terms of this piece of work with Integrate Pacifica. But yes, before I start into answering the questions, just a brief background as to where Integrate Pacifica came from. So it really came about through, a number of observations over the last few years, particularly around disaster risk assessment initiatives. And these were specifically those that were implemented, with SPC or through our particular program in the Disaster Community Resilience Program. And that, there was a whole lot of data and information or risk information that was produced. People were coming together, relationships were developed, but it always seemed to be defined by the life cycle of a particular project. And then I know, a lot of people that are online as well today, a lot of you that are online would have gone through certain experiences where as soon as the project ended, all that risk information, all that data, all the relationships that was probably developed through that, somewhat becomes inaccessible, or, is just sitting in a server or somewhat in a hard drive, and isn't really being used there, which is probably the biggest part of having this risk information is how it can inform or strengthen risk inform decision making. And so, the way Integrate came out from, was really providing a parallel space, where this, risk information, regardless of the initiative, uh, you know, in the disaster risk space, could be not only, there could be an avenue where the people are made aware of the existing risk information, but it's also accessible and also a space where practitioners could collaborate over it. And as you know, we meet physically as much as our conferences allow us, or as much as our workshops, particularly in this space. But other than that, there isn't. I mean, other than emails, our social media platforms that we keep in contact with, there wasn't actually a space where you had all your data sets, all your risk information available, and also being able to collaborate over that. So much like a community of practice of sorts, and a virtual space to do so and to constantly collaborate. And so that's where Integrate came out from an observation as such. And before we, the idea was a virtual space where this could happen. But as a lot of you may be aware, there's already a number of platforms, portals of such, that already exist, whether it's at the regional level or even at the national level in itself. And a lot of these platforms, at the moment are currently, or how do you say, one-way engagement where the user can only view, upload, download, and so on and so forth. And so where Integrate was really trying to make a difference was, or actually add some value, was providing a space where these users of that data, risk data and information, could also collaborate. I know I have limited time here, but maybe just to skip onto the question that was asked by Rachel, and so basically what Integrate is trying to do is bring the existing or publicly available risk information, wherever source that it might be at, whether it's an existing platform or in someone's hard drive or server or within an agency, and literally bringing that closer to the user on a virtual space. And the angle that we were looking at utilizing was through communities of practice. And obviously this is defined in numerous ways, whether it's a technical working group or committee. But basically what a community of practice is a group of people coming together to share information and knowledge over a common objective. And so that was the angle that we were really looking on. And Integrate really focuses more on the people aspect. As we know, we have heaps of tools out there, where there are risk tools, heaps of platforms that have these data sets. But without the people, these are just systems and data sets that are there, and the application is kind of lacking. And so Integrate really tries to bring the existing resources a bit closer to the people through the approach of communities of practice. I did have a few slides available. Maybe I can share that during the rapid rounds, but I'm aware that I have only a few minutes to talk about this. In terms of helping in decision making, Integrate, as some of us might be aware, there's a huge gap in terms of how we translate some of our technical information, not only to decision makers, internally, but also to the community. And so Integrate is hoping to provide a space where, not only decision makers can come together as themselves, but together with technical staff, and also, to come about with innovative ways to also present how risk information is shared. That's very broadly, but I'm happy to share more detail about it, later on through this session. But yeah, Rachel, I hope, that covered very briefly. I know I have limited time, but I'm aware that we have other speakers as well. So, yeah, Vinaka.
Thank you, Orisi, and don't worry, we are flexible with the timing today, so we're happy to give you a few more minutes where you need it as well. But thank you as well for the first intervention. What you highlighted at the start of your discussion was looking at the life cycle of projects and really what happens to the data post project. And I think that's something that has been highlighted a lot in the region. Is really what happens, to it afterwards. Does it, just sort of fall into an empty space, or is it, housed at a regional organization, or what actually happens to it? Can it be used again, for other projects, not necessarily stopping when the project life cycle stops. So it's really good to sort of think about that as well. Also, one of your other points was looking at how risk data and information is presented or translated to those that need to make the decisions. And for those of you that were present during our first event as well, and I can send you all of this information too, we did have an excellent presentation by Lisa Kingsbury from SPC on different ways to, communicate, anything really, but really on how you could apply it to communicating risk information and data as well. And I think some of the tips that she gave in that presentation, in that event, were really useful as well, and something that we can continually think about, when we talk to people as well, because, one of the biggest things is not just generating this data and information. It's really about, how it's used and reused, for many years to come as well. So thank you again, Orisi, for highlighting that. We do have more questions, and we'll come back to you later as well for that. We'd now like to pass over to Director John Strickland from Emergency Management Cook Islands. Director, we do have a few questions for you today, and we have already received a few questions via email for you as well. So we will relay those throughout this webinar today. But really, we'd like to know more about the EMCI's Geo portal, how it's being used by the National Disaster Council to inform real-time decisions, and really how the different ministries in the Cook Islands, or ministries or sectors in the Cook Islands, are integrating the information on this platform into their workflows, and how it better helps with the decision making on the ground. Thank you, Director, and over to you.
Kia ora, Rachel, and kia ora, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be online to share what we have taken advantage with the GeoPortal mapping system. In view of what we have developed, I just want to state the following. Perhaps I will start off how we were able to put this into perspective in our case here in the Cook Islands. It wasn't an easy journey. For your information, especially having to approach respected agencies and to talk about the data, of sharing their data for us to put things together once and for all. I'm sure this is the same thing that most of the islands or the countries are facing as well, of having to have a shared type of data for everyone to have accessibility to it. And of course, with some areas of confidentiality that cannot be shared, which is totally respected, and we have that in place for everyone. In our case, in having to do these data, we had to start from square one, which is that we have to do surveys to respected islands all around the Cook Islands and Rarotonga to start putting things into order. For example, we had to visit each respected household and actually obtain the data information in terms of who lives in, who is and any source of information in regards to disabilities within the household, the age level, the elderlies, and many more. And also the surveys also we went through and conducted by checking all the type of building materials or the infrastructure that was put into place for each household, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not just talking about residential. I'm talking about government buildings and private companies all around the island of Rarotonga. And we adopted the same principle of approach to the rest of the I call it the outer islands here in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. And I'm glad to say that it took us quite some time. We went through some difficulties with some of the households, especially they are not keen to actually share with us the information that we were after. And at the end of the day, after being explained the purpose behind this, they were openly came to flow with the whole thing with us and were able to share what they had in place. Today, in brief, I'd like to say that each individual household, each individual private sector buildings, the government buildings, we have every detail of each building, the location, the coordinates, etc., etc. And right now, it's actually formalized and is updated. We are now doing an updated version of the whole geoportal mapping of the islands, and it's amazing. I can tell you how important these source of information is for us here in the Cook Islands. And we were able to cater a lot of that source for us. The other thing was that dealing with our government agencies, IT people with their data, it's like going through a 6 feet thick wall, to be honest, and trying to break that barrier. And it took me quite some time to convince them. And simply because I advise all of them that we have the Esri GIS license and able to have 100 users on the system, and we can share all our data that we have in place as well to them. Now we have our infrastructure, Cook Island, who's actually responsible with our LiDAR system in place, and we're able to combine. And to that, I'm pleased to say we now have what we call a GIS group who actually works together with my personnel in my office, and we share the information and now available when needed. This is a must. One way of us making sure that it's made available is because every time we do have a disaster or a hazard of any type, my office is where the Prime Minister walks in. He walks in, he just turns around and says to me, Mr. Strickland, tell me what's happening. I have to provide all the information he's after and all the detail, the technology, and you name it. I have to make that all available. Then if it's something to do with our waterworks or agriculture, then I get the respected agencies or secretary to be in my office and to actually explain everything to the Prime Minister, what needs to be known, etc., etc. This is the kind of approach we have developed. We have formalized that unity amongst us all here in the Cook Islands on that approach. The other thing that I'd like to say that it wasn't an easy journey. I said it earlier. Is that I had to go through all these ways to actually capture all the information. And to date, we have the latest information in terms of our census. As we know, we do a 4 years count of all our census. But today, I can make it available. We have the latest, and we have the more accurate census of information because we do all the surveys. We just did one 2 years ago. We're now going through another one now. We will have full details for every single thing, simply because of the migration of people. People move from island to island. Here to the Rarotonga, we call it small Auckland, and then they move on to New Zealand, and they move on to Australia. So we have to make sure that we have the appropriate numbers of people, and we know exactly who are the disabilities on each village, each household, and we have to make sure we know who are the elderly within, and that sort of information is available in our system. These are the beauty of this system. Now, I think that's enough of the introductory part. Let me go on to the questions that was raised, something to do about the geoportal being used by the National Disaster Council to inform real-time decisions making. This is great. This source of information actually is an added value for us. As I stated earlier, with all those type of information I just shared, it makes things easier for us. It makes things easier for us to decide if we were to go through and identify which area has to be evacuated. Should we have an approach over 5-meter waves in our coastal areas of the north or the south or whatever, or any island? We have the data available. We know exactly who is within that area. We know exactly what is the risk area. We can have these people all removed and evacuated when the need arises. This is the kind of thing that we have in place available to us. And every time we have this happen, in my office, I have the mandate to actually share. I mean, when something happens that needs to be brought out to the community. I do that in my own office, and then we decide whether we'll go to do we have to go to a emergency status or not, or it's just going to be a notice to our community, an awareness notice for everyone to be aware what's really going on in terms of any tropical depression or any bad weather pattern, adverse weather that's happening to us. And I'm able to go through with this sources that I have, I'm able to get that technology, put it into place and put it out together. But if it comes to a major decision making, for example, for a emergency status to be made, we have due process to follow, which is that I'm required to go through on our normal act and ensure compliance, and I'm mandated to go through that, call our council. We meet in my office and share everything that needs to be known with the rest of my partners. And for example, the meteorological office, we meet and discuss, and in climate change, we meet, put things together, come to a decision and share it out to our council members. Then that's when we actually activate what we call our emergency operations center. This is how things we operate here in the Cook Islands. As I said again, it's the circumstances that will dictate the course of action that we would make. And I believe what we have in place with this type of source in place for us, it actually helps us a lot in making a decision. And it does make sense, as I stated, the LiDAR source and everything else, technology. The other thing I want to highlight and serious about this is the importance of traditional knowledge, or some call it local knowledge, and some call it indigenous knowledge. All these facts must go hand in hand with technology. And this is an area of focus that we need to look at and make sure that every time we do this, and that information with our traditional knowledge certainly helps. And I will quote this, taking the Tonga Tapu experience that happened about 2 years ago. And this is something that we treasure a lot in our system. It goes hand in hand, and it's something that we have to take heed on. In terms of the triple tool, what does it do? Does it make any change in our outcome? Yes, it does. Seriously. It gives us the leeway, it gives us the best way of approach. And we have the information available on how we can minimize the time frame as well to attend to any incident that may be in place, and who do we consult with to bring us assistance and support. As we all know, we have a whole government approach, whatever, when it comes to any disaster or to any emergency status. And we do everything together in partnership. We have our agencies, we have everybody that works together. They have their own, what we call standard operation procedures in place, and they are to review this every single year. And we work closely with all our agencies, and not forgetting our community. Our community is a key component, that we have a memorandum of understanding with 10 of our community members here in Rarotonga, and that is actually a permanent group that works under my umbrella in the Emergency Management Office. And this is an awesome organization where they provide support to any matters that we will request. And of course, taking the COVID, for example, and the Ministry of Health was overwhelmed. They cannot carry a lot of stuff. So this came out to hand to support and help our Ministry of Health in doing all the services around the country, and even all around on the island as well. I could go on and quote more if you wish. And there are other areas that I can share to say how important the geoportal mapping is, seriously, and help things and make things easier for us to make easy decision making. Challenges, I haven't had much of those challenges from anyone regarding the geoportal mapping, but these are facts. These are reality, and we have that made available, and our people are very much comfortable with what we are doing now. The key thing is the awareness, making sure that our people are aware what's going on. Even if we have a tropical depression, we have to notify. Even if we had our recent tsunami warnings that was coming out, we were able to provide those information and share it out to our people in advance through the media, through social media, whatever you name it, through our own online in our system, and that's the beauty of our system that we provide out in the Cook Islands. Another question is that how is different ministries or sectors integrating the platform into their workflows? We all work together on this. We all develop things together. As I stated earlier, the Ministry of Infrastructure developed a lot of the information. Even our water system in Rarotonga, we all combine together. If you want to know any information about the water system, the pipings around the island, we have accessibility to that we could share and work things, how we can address whatever issues that arises. I think I've said it a bit more on this one, but I'm open for any other discussions, any other questions that may be brought up, and I'm prepared to share that. Unfortunately, I'm unable to provide a presentation, but I can share that later on. I can send it across to Rachel and share the information we have on our geoportal mapping, and it's a privilege. I could share this anytime. Rachel, I hope that's good enough at this time.
Thank you so much, Director. Thank you as well for highlighting so many great points. I think, just starting on from your first point, where you talked about data collection in the Cook Islands, data and information is obviously something very sensitive in our region. And I think, it really ties back to the IP aspects of this data collection, and some of the things that we often worry about is what this information is going to be used for, and if it's, I don't know, just if it's going to be exploited or something like that in some sort of way. And I think that's always a concern that we as Pacific people often face as well. So I think what you've done in the Cook Islands is a tremendous effort by you and your team. It's really great to see that as an outcome now. It's really great to see the coordination as well from your side. It's great that you've also highlighted traditional knowledge, which is something that can be, I guess, not emphasized from the beginning with some projects that look at this, but that's slowly been integrated into many, as we are seeing moving forward as well. As well as the awareness, I guess this ties back to the data collection as well in the Cook Islands, having the awareness around what the data and the information is being used for, and how it's consistently being used as well. Director, we did have a question from Belle Ben in the chat box, and sorry, apologies. They did ask what are some of the challenges that you have faced in data collection, and I think that you have answered that well as well. But just to let everybody know on this webinar that we will have a dedicated Q&A session. So if you'd like to come off mute at any point during that time, you can directly ask your question to the panelists as well. But thank you so much, Director John, for that. So as mentioned, unfortunately, Christopher Saili was not able to, well, he is actually online with us today, but he's currently boarding a plane, so he's not able to speak at this point in time, but we'd like to just acknowledge his presence on this webinar as well. Thank you, Chris, for joining us briefly. So Christopher is the Director of Kahuto Pacific, which is now turning into a major data service in the region. So we do have a pre-recorded message for Christopher. So I'd like to just kindly request either Navneet or oh no, it's just Navneet, please, if you wouldn't mind playing the video, the pre-recorded video, as well as enabling the audio. Thank you.
I won't be able to join the live discussion today, but I have pre-recorded some answers that were asked of me. The first question is, how is the Moana platform supporting decisions in sectors like infrastructure, climate, or disaster response? The Moana Data Service was created to give Pacific Island countries access to national LiDAR and imagery products that have previously been out of reach. We've just completed our first phase of mapping, covering 1,000 square kilometers across the main centers of Viti Levu, and we're now awaiting delivery of the final data products. Once these are ready, they'll be available through the Moana web platform, where users can explore and interact with the data directly. We saw a clear gap. Hydrologists and engineers in the Pacific have had to rely on satellite-derived elevation models, which are valuable, but lack the granularity needed for accurate flood modeling, infrastructure planning, or drainage design. LiDAR-derived digital elevation models bring a new level of precision and trust. Because we've tied these data sets to extensive ground control surveys, decision makers can have confidence in the outputs, whether they're designing roads, planning flood defenses, or modeling climate impacts. In short, Moana provides the high-resolution, locally validated data that's critical for better decisions in infrastructure and disaster risk management. Second question is, can you share a use case where centralized access to spatial data led to a better or faster decision? Our data sets are not yet live on Moana, so I can't share an example from the platform itself, but I can highlight a story that illustrates the power of LiDAR. In Gizo, in the Solomon Islands, Western Province, communities have long struggled with water security. Previous efforts to locate a reliable source failed. We were asked by SMEC and Solomon Water to help capture LiDAR across the catchment area. This data allowed geologists and hydrologists to model the terrain beneath dense vegetation, something traditional surveys couldn't do accurately. By using LiDAR, they were able to pinpoint the movement of water, underground and plan seismic testing alignments with much higher precision. This improved their chances of successfully identifying viable boreholes for extraction. It's a good example of how access to accurate terrain data can unlock solutions to challenges that directly affect communities' daily lives. Question 3. How are you working with governments or agencies to embed Moana into their planning processes? Right now, our focus is on engagement and awareness. We're meeting with ministries and agencies to introduce them to Moana, explain how it works, and importantly, learn about their priorities. We're also preparing to provide training so that by the time the data sets are live, users will already be comfortable with the platform. One of the challenges across the Pacific is that agencies often work in silos, with very limited data sharing. Moana is designed as a common platform, a single source of truth, where ministries, agencies, and partners can interact with the same information. For example, in recent discussions with the National Disaster Management Office, we discovered that post-disaster aerial imagery is often unavailable to them, even though it's essential for assessments and coordination. Through Moana, we want to close that gap by having sensors and survey capabilities based locally. This would enable rapid aerial assessments after disasters and make the information available directly through the platform. Our approach is to co-design with governments, tailoring the platform to their specific workflows, so that Moana isn't just a tool, but becomes part of their decision-making process. Question number 4. What kinds of decisions are most sensitive to the quality and accessibility of spatial data? The most sensitive decisions are those where accuracy and timing can mean the difference between resilience and vulnerability. Infrastructure design is a clear example. If elevation data is wrong, drainage system may fail, a road may flood, or a seawall may be under-designed. Disaster response is another. After a cyclone or flood, decision makers need immediate, trusted data on damage and access routes to coordinate relief. Climate adaptation planning also depends heavily on high-quality spatial data, whether it's mapping sea level rise, assessing erosion risks, or urban planning growth. The quality of the baseline data directly shapes the quality of the decisions. In all these cases, if data is missing, outdated, or fragmented, the risk is passed on to communities. That's why Moana's mission is to not only to provide access, but to do so with fairness, care, and trust, so that Pacific leaders can make decisions with confidence backed by reliable information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Christopher, who wasn't able to join us today, but was able to send through a pre-recorded message to address some of the questions that we had for him. With that, so I do note that Chris did highlight quite a bit in that intervention. Things like locally validated data, which I think is something that's very important in the region, because often at times, we receive data, but we're not sure, how or if it has been validated on the ground. Things like closing the data gap as well is obviously something that we're still trying to work towards in the region. And something that he really highlighted as well was the quality of the baseline data and fragmented data that we do see quite a bit across the region. So something for all of us to think about, just from a private sector point of view as well, and how we can really leverage support from the private sector into what we're doing as well in this space. With that, I would also like to ask Navneet, please, if you could just start our Zoom poll. So we do have a few questions for everybody who has joined us today as an attendee. We would really like to see hear your opinions on these few questions, just 6 of them. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long, but please don't overthink please don't overthink the answers too much. We'd really just like your instant, I guess, reactions to some of them as well. So the first one is on how often do you use risk data or tools in your current role or decision-making context? The second one looks at what is the biggest barrier to using risk information in your work. If you feel that the barrier that you might face is not listed here, please feel free as well to pop this in the chat and we'll note it down as well. This is just something that we have come up with to use as sort of a baseline for this question as well. Which enabling condition would most improve your ability to apply this risk data? Again, if you're not seeing, answers that are relevant to you, please also just feel free to put them in the chat box. We'd like to learn more from all of you as well, to be able to improve this series as well moving forward. Which type of risk tool feels most immediately useful for your context? Number 5, how confident are you in interpreting risk data to inform decisions in your sector or role? And number 6, last but not least, what would help you most in applying tools like those showcased today? So just to give you a quick recap, we did hear first and foremost from Orisi Naivalurua, who took us through Integrate Pacifica, highlighting things like, what happens to data and information past the project life cycle? How do we make it accessible and encourage collaboration across sectors as well as across government ministries? Emphasizing the role of communities of practice, whether or not whether they be in the form of technical working groups or committees, that have a shared vision towards doing something together. Something that he has seen through these experiences as well is how the application of risk data and information is lacking and could obviously be a lot more in our region as well. And then looking at how the translation of risk information is to decision makers that need to be able to make quick, fast and informed decisions as well. Second, we heard from John Strickland, who is the director for the Cook Islands Emergency Management. He discussed the geoportal with us as well, and a lot of great things came out of this discussion, across collaboration, in the Cook Islands, building trust with communities, especially looking at how data and information is very sensitive as well, and looking at how we can weave in traditional knowledge as well as awareness into our activities when looking at risk data and information. Christopher Saili, as we heard from last, was more of a private sector point of view as well. well. Looking at locally validated data on the ground, how we can improve that moving forward, closing the data gap especially. And as mentioned earlier, just looking at the quality of the baseline data and some of the fragmented data sets that we're seeing across the region. So I hope that has given you some time to really incorporate your answers into that. And I think from our point of view, we would like to close off the Zoom poll now, if that's okay, please, Navneet. And if the answers to any of the questions, you feel were not relevant or were not included, please also let us know, because we look forward to improving this moving forward as well. Thank you all for your participation in that Zoom poll. Now I'd like to re-invite our distinguished speakers for today. We will be having a rapid fire round of questions, looking at some of the key lessons from the application of risk information and risk data and information from across the region as it relates to the projects that you have spoken about before. So Orisi, please, I'd like to turn the time over to you with a question. What do you think has been the enabling condition that has helped move from learning to action in one of the partner countries that Integrate Pacifica is involved in? If you have an example that you would like to give or share a use case as well for that, we'd really like to hear from you again. Vinako Orisi, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel, and also thank you, fellow panelists, for sharing some great work, from Cook Islands and also from Chris as well. But yeah, if maybe to answer that question in terms of an enabling condition, with Integrate Pacifica, we did have this current phase is at the regional level, and so our approach before we got into actually somewhat coming together to put together another a platform of sorts, we first had to be fair with understanding the current landscape in information and knowledge management systems, and a key part to understanding was, yes, country consultations, but also having a co-design approach, meaning that we'd not come with with an idea of how it should look, but sit with all our country stakeholders and start from ground zero together, and that that meant a change in how things were done in terms of how platforms are created or how tools are created, particularly in the disaster space. And so it was sitting down together, identifying what were the issues. Yes, we've heard a few already in terms of silos, the lack of a centralized database, governance side in terms of sensitive information, not only at the regional level, but also at the national level. And so we went through a number of co-design workshops where we tried to identify what were the issues, what are the possible solutions, and then also identify, okay, where we can start off with in terms of biting off a piece that we can chew, understanding that this particular effort, what Integrate was trying to do in having a place where not only people could access or find all things to do with disaster risk information, but also able to collaborate over it. And so in doing so, there was a huge emphasis on the users of the information and also of the platform. And with a people-centered approach, we really focused how we could actually develop the system around that. And so I think in sharing this particular methodology, an enabling condition was just having that environment, that open environment where, we came together to identify, we came together to look at the solutions and progress the solutions, whether it was the technicality of this particular platform and how we could bring the resources to the people a bit closer. And that had a ripple effect. We saw, throughout the countries where, and if you I don't know if everyone was able to see the results for the poll that we just did, and there were a number of things. For question one, the highest thing that everyone alluded to was limited access to data. And question two was better coordination across agencies. And, for these two things, behind that is actually people and the perspectives, and obviously leadership and governance as well. But behind it is actual people. And so the enabling condition, or was the methodology that we approached Integrate Pacifica with, was a co-creation in terms of changing mindsets behind the value of risk information, and how we can how important the collaboration is, not only at the regional level, where we had peer-to-peer exchanges, but also how they trickle down to the national level between sectors, and understanding the landscape a bit better before we tried to piece things together. And we looked at it from 4 different pillars, from the governance that was in place in terms of information and knowledge management or sharing. We looked at the processes in terms of SOPs, and what was currently being practiced in the absence of systems that held disaster risk information. We looked at governance, what were the current policies or mandates, who were the current mandated sectors, and also looked at people, the capacity at which some of these countries had. And, it was a great time. I see, 1 or 2 of the focal points from the 6 countries online today. But that in itself was an enabling condition to have an honest conversation about some of the issues that we had, and that trickled down to how they approached some of their communities of practice in countries. I mean, for example, in Vanuatu, led by Johnny Terry and his team in the Ministry of Climate Change, and them being able to bring together or kind of formalize the group of their GIS users within the ministry. Within the ministry they have a number of departments, and so being able to formalize that in terms of an SOP, and being able to talk over the existing data that they have or risk information that they have, and have certain objectives to it. So it was through some of those enabling concepts, this was able to trickle down to the national level. It is, a longer term piece of work, but for Integrate, maybe just to share briefly, it was, I think, that co-design or co-creation process, which I believe should be practiced more often in terms of whether it's a system that's coming about, or even products in itself, particularly in our space. So yeah, Vinaka.
Vinaka, and thank you so much, Orisi, for giving us those insights, into how, into some of the successes for Integrate Pacifica. I really note, the co-design, the co-creation process as well. I was also part of some of that too. And I'm sure some of the, I see a lot of familiar names as well on this call, and I know that they were also a part of that process moving forward. I think one of the things that you mentioned around, capacities, local capacities within countries, it's, sometimes it can be a little bit of a balancing act as well, like sometimes, you need to sort of match what you want to do, can do with what you are able to realistically do in the countries as well. So thank you for emphasizing that, and especially the strong emphasis on the users of the information moving forward. So I think that was great. Thank you again, Orisi. Director John, we'd like to come back to you at this time as well. So maybe if you could just give us some insights into, what's one decision that would have been harder or perhaps riskier without the geoportal in the Cook Islands. Thank you, Director, and over to you.
Kira, again, everyone. Yeah, this is a hard one, Rachel. But nevertheless, I think when it comes to decision making, uh, if it's related to fire, based on this question here, it's I would state it's related to um, uncertainty. Without the proper information, without the source that will be of importance to you to make your decision making, then you'll be having that difficulty. Of course, you'll be under pressure to make a decision in all these activities. So uncertainty is one factor that I believe is a issue in making that decision. And with your portal, with all the sources available to you and so forth, it should be something that will be pretty much quick for you to make a decision of what sort of actions that you're going to take. Now, I'm just referring to fire. Now, for us here in the Cook Islands, we do have protocols, we do have processes in place that's already set. Anything with the fire, the MCI officers don't really partake with this part over here. That is to do with the police. And so we already have mechanisms in place to take control and manage those kind of services, whatever that happens. But yes, the mapping, the geoportal factors do help. The type of structure, the type of materials that has been built, and many more things that gives us an idea how long this building will burn to practically to the ground by having all this type of information and so forth, and also the design, the interior, how does it look like, and what kind of utilities nearby, such as water tanks or whatever that would be. So it will also help in making that decision making. But part of that is the uncertainty of information. Whatever that is, it will create a bit of a problem. I hope I made this point fairly clear.
Apologies, Director. I thought you were going to add more to that question. Don't worry. No. I wasn't sure if you were stopping or continuing, so I didn't want to interrupt either way. Thank you again for answering that question. I think that when we're thinking about risk data and information, we also really have to think about how we can apply it to the different sectors. So Cook Islands has a lot of good use case and examples from locally and nationally led activities. So I think that's also something that we would like to continue to hear throughout this webinar as well. So thank you again for that. Orisi, we'll come back to you quickly with another question, please. So you did touch on enabling conditions, for the first part of this rapid fire round. But perhaps you could touch on some of the challenges in, acquiring this risk knowledge, and really, I guess, not implementing, but really facilitating that into more formal decision-making channels. So we'd like to hear a bit about that from you. Thank you, Orisi, and over to you.
Naka, thank you, Rachel. It's a great question as well about some of the challenges around risk knowledge and how to get this into formal decision-making channels. And as a number of us in online would know, it's been an ongoing issue, which has been would sometimes has taken a longer time than expected. But through, if I may, through the Integrate Pacifica initiative, and something that we identified, or acknowledged was, and this came out in the poll as well that literally just went through, was there's an acknowledgement of, that there was heaps of risk information available in its, in its different forms, different standards, whether it was a exposure data set, so you're looking at hazard models, or even looking at vulnerability functions in itself. And so, one of the biggest challenges prior to actually getting it into decision making was really having some sort of a standardized effort towards it. I know of a few initiatives, that in terms of exposure data, which tried to or which did try to implement, a minimum standard for exposure data, and that was through the Picraphy project. And we come back to one of the things that were highlighted through the poll about limited access to data, and at the national level, different ministries are mandated to collect different data sets, and they're all at different standards. Likewise, whether it be the resolution or the accuracy at which some of these data sets are collected vary as well. And I think, speaking into one of the bigger challenges that were already identified through the poll was just behind all of this was I think really the people behind it, or those that are in leadership, that can actually that identify the value of risk information, and how that can really strengthen or maybe provide an accurate basis for decision making, particularly in planning or how resources are allocated. I mean, a great example has been through Director John Strickland as a leader, who's been really pushing, for a lot of these in terms of how risk knowledge can be institutionalized or integrated in the decision-making process. And so I think, it as much as it's about data, it's about the people as well that are in leadership and that can see the value as well. And that's something that really came out through our conversations in Integrate Pacifica, and with our focal points, the different NDMOs from the 7 countries. So yeah, Naka.
Thank you so much, Orisi, for that. And you've highlighted a lot of good and key points from that as well. I'm just a little bit conscious of time, so I'd like to just pass the mic back to Director John, please. So you did talk to us about what's one decision that would have been harder or riskier without the geoportal. I think what we'd like to hear from you now, is what is perhaps the biggest barrier, or perhaps one of the most evolving challenges that you currently face with cross-sector use of the platform. So I know you're getting asked a lot of very difficult questions from me, Director John. I do apologize, but I think it's something that we'd all like to hear as well. But please feel free to politely decline my request for questions if that suits you better. But Director, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for listening. Yeah, I could have gone with that second question and continue on, and even the third question and respond, but I will respond to the 2 of them now. In terms of the biggest barrier, this is a quite a sensitive one, obviously. As we know, each sector will have a different goals, culture, the trust deficit, the power imbalance, and the pool resource of providing pool resource and constraints and constraint and impedes in a lot of our decision making here because of those factors in play. And this is for real. As you all know, in the private sector firms, they have their own driven line of having to do their kind of services with us, and even the non-profit organization. Resource constraints, this has always been an area of difficulty when it comes to that kind of area, seriously. As we all know, government have their own due processes to follow, habit cycle to go through, and it's a must, and many more. And other agencies have their own way of doing this. Power imbalance, this is another factor that we need to look at seriously. When we talk about power imbalance, we can emerge, particularly when the whole sector we get more financial leverage than others, ensuring equitable participation and decision-making authority is essential to present dominance by one partner and maintain the commitment of others. So the key here is partnership. Everybody having the same thinking, having the same process of helping each other, and before it reaches, before it comes to a decision making. And this kind of thing do happen, but we all high level managers, we know how to work on this stuff. Although we have our government there who's actually coordinating, making sure compliance, as we all know that. So ensure all these are in order, and that's the beauty of everybody being working in partnership and sharing the kind of approach in whatever we have to do in all our endeavors. Now, the other question is, what enabling condition helped embed a Chill Portal into national coordination? This is a good one. I have to refer to my notes. So it's actually Chill Portal is the main features and includes support for various geospatial standards, dynamic graphical interface integration with external data sources, community-tailored project models, and metadata definition, best practices of data-driven decision-making. We define them, we collect them, we analyze, develop, and evaluate. So in terms of what we are talking about here and so forth, it's not an easy journey. It's always been a lot of thinking by having everybody integrated, having everybody working together in partnership. It actually makes things easier for all. So again, so we all be speaking the same language and make the right decision for all. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Director. It definitely does. I think you've summed it up well when you say it's not an easy journey. And I think that's also something that, we continue to recognize in the region, that, the activities that we're involved in and the processes that we're trying to drive are all part of a journey and something that continues to evolve on a daily basis. So thank you again, Orisi and John, Director John, for answering the rapid fire round of questions. Now we do have time for the attendees online to be able to ask your questions as well. We have time for about 2 to 3 questions, please. So we do have one question that's currently in the chat, Director, and it's for you. So, the question is, we hear a lot about incorporating traditional knowledge into weather-related communication. So from the Cook Islands, are you able to share some practical examples on how to do this effectively, or have you seen any others from around the region that you would be able to share, please? Thank you, Director, and over to you.
Traditional knowledge, I think I did quote it at the beginning, especially with the experience Tonga Tapu went through 2 years ago. That traditional knowledge factor I would refer to is to do with the birds that was actually flying in, and very unusual, the dogs barking and running inland, that kind of stuff. That gave an indication to the director for Tonga that something is obviously coming up, and they haven't had the warning notice yet. Eventually, it actually took place, and that protected and prevented a lot of injuries to the people of Tonga. And this is serious, very sensitive, and very emotional, what they had gone through in that period of time with this traditional knowledge factor. And it is a must that we should treasure and make sure that they work together with our technologies, whatever we have in place. That's why I quoted they all go hand in hand. And it's important. I thought I'll quote this because it is serious. Our traditional knowledge must be recognized. It must go together with everybody. It's my view on this particular subject. I hope that helps. For us here in the Cook Islands, we have our own data of our own signs of anything to do with our weather coming. We have our own available that we can share to everyone who wishes to do that. It's got to be some similarities among us in the Pacific region. So this is one reason that I'm very much strong in pushing the acknowledgement of our traditional knowledge within the Pacific.
Thank you so much, Director, for that as well. So I do see a few comments coming through in the chat. So if you do have a question, please feel free to let us know, and that we'll get Navneet, our IT guru, to be able to unmute you and to be able to ask your question directly. And if you don't have a question, but you'd like to make a comment or an observation about some of the discussions that we've had today, you're also very welcome to do so as well. So I'd like to pass the time over to our audience for any questions, comments, observations. Navneet, I'm not sure how the IT will work with that, but I'm sure that you'll see attendees trying to come off mute. Is that correct?
Probably
yet?
just be a raising hand, and then
Okay.
we'll allow them to talk. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if you could just, if you are able to go to the React button on the Zoom toolbar, you'll be able to see the raise hand function there as well. If you'd like to directly come off and be able to do that, we'll allow you this time. We have this time now for you to be able to do so. Thank you. If you have any questions or comments or observations, whether about the contents discussed so far, if you'd like to know what's happening next, we're happy to also answer those. Thank you. I don't see anybody raising their hand yet, but I do see Carleen, who is online and also sent through a couple of questions prior to this webinar starting. Thank you so much, Carleen, for doing that. And I know that you were also in attendance during the first webinar too, but perhaps you'd like to come online and, come online and just ask your questions directly. If you prefer, or I could do that for you. Oh, okay. I see that you're here. So, Carleen, please, over to you. Thank you. Okay, perhaps if Carleen would prefer, I'm happy to also just read out the questions. Director John, we're back to you again, if that's okay. So Carleen's question to you. So she's part of the she works for the government of FSM. So she's with us here today as well. So her question is, as a director, how are you strategically driving a whole of government approach to ensure that disaster and climate risk information is not consistently defined and understood across relevant sectors? For example, planning, finance, infrastructure, environment, but also actively demanded and integrated into core policy, investment decisions, and operational planning to build national resilience. Thank you, Director, and over to you. Another tough question for you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Definitely a tough question, but it's always been a challenge, regardless of what happens. In my small office of 3, 4 with me, we have been one that has been identified only when it comes to time of a disaster or when it has. This is when everybody wants to know where is EMCI. Anyway, in having to build that relationship, I'm able to build this amongst all agencies in the government, even the community, building them together, having a say in everything else that we do in our office. Inclusive. Remember, there's always a saying, I keep saying this, it goes like this. Diversity is just having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice. Belonging is having that voice heard, so no one's left behind. This is my key component that I use a lot to actually bring everybody together and build their partnership and to close collaboration with Israel, including my partners internationally and so forth. And I do a lot of this by building that together. And of course, there has to be a close relationship with your own bosses in your country, as well as up to the ministerial level. By having this brought to their notice, by sharing what you see is of importance for the country, based on your plans that you have in place, that gives you that support, that gives you that strong motion to actually have everybody work with you. But the key is building that partnership with all agencies, the community, and your relationship with international partners as well. So this is some of the things that I could only say at this time. And of course, whatever we talk about, we share. At the end of the day, we all look forward for a positive feedback from everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought that I will quote one more point here that's been missing in our discussions all this time, and this is related to space weather, which we are now here in Sydney going through a session that I see of importance all around us here in the Pacific. And I think most of us in the Pacific are being left behind. It's simply because all the countries with the resources, with all the money, are able to move forward. And most of us in Pacific Islands are left behind, especially when you talk about the radar, you talk about the satellites, you talk about there's other type of technology available. And this is an area that we can tap in as well to actually have that equal same in bar with the rest of the world. That's what I'm trying to say. And here, there's been a lot of strong emphasis on traditional knowledge as well. So in other words, space weather, anything to do with us, to do with our cyclone, or to do with even what you're doing, they all go hand in hand together. Technology, which is inclusive of space, because you're talking about what we call digital Earth, Pacific, you're talking about whatever's happening worldwide. Right here in Sydney, there's about 7,000 participants, and looking at all the resources available is there. But a lot of us, the Pacific, is actually missing out in a lot of this area. This is where we want to tap in and build our relationship in this area as well, in terms of the latest technology available. I thought I'd quote this as well, Rachel. I hope that I've answered the questions that has been tabled.
Thank you so much, Director, for that. And yes, I think you have, and I think you've highlighted a lot about the different types of leadership and partnerships that have to happen in order to facilitate this as well. Orisi, we do have a question for you, a quick question for you as well from Caroline, and then we'll go to Josie's question for you again, Director John, if that's okay. So Orisi, for you, from Caroline, given the diverse context and varying levels of technical capacity across Pacific Islands countries and territories, what specific strategies or tools is your project employing to bridge the gap between technical risk, between technical risk data / assessments and the practical understanding and demand for this information by local planners and communities, ensuring that it translates into tangible, resilient tools? Over to you, Orisi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a great question as well. That Kalin is asking. Bula Kalin, it's been a while. But it's a long, like I mentioned, a longer term effort as well, and something that I believe would be informed through a number of other projects and other initiatives as well. But particularly through Integrate Pacifica, as I mentioned, the virtual space or the platform that we're currently progressing not only provides an area where you can access information, disaster risk information and knowledge, but also we're also aware of a number of non-accredited and accredited capacity building or capacity building modules that have been created through a few other initiatives, whether it be through PIMA, Pacific Island Emergency Management Alliance, and also supported through BSRP and PHWP, a few other SPC led initiatives. And so what Integrate also is also trying to provide a platform to, you know, strengthening, you know, or running parallel to the in-country capacity building initiatives in the disaster space is also providing an area where all, you know, where these capacity building activities or these trainings could be in, you know, with a longer term effort, somewhat accredited, or if it's non-accredited, put into an online version, also made accessible through the Integrate Pacifica platform. And so bringing some sustainability to the capacity that's built around technical risk data and assessments. And, you know, there's a number of initiatives that have focused particularly on the technicality of risk assessments, disaster risk assessments, and that's through the, you know, some of you might have heard of the Pacific Risk Tools for Resilience initiative, funded through MFED for about 6 countries, which looked at the fundamentals for risk assessment and also the fundamentals for GIS in terms of trying to analyze exposure and hazard and looking at risk information. And so, I mean, going back to the question, how, you know, specific tools to kind of bridge that gap is, you know, again, availability of those online training modules as well, you know, where we can access in the absence of funding to have national in-country activities. You can also access these training sessions online as well. You know, and that informs the practical understanding as well, and somewhat strengthen the demand for this information. Now going down to, in terms of, you know, the demand for local planners and communities and ensuring that it translates into tangible resilience tools. You know, there was a great example through, you know, with Tuvalu in terms of initiative under the TCAP project, where they worked with the communities and using community values as the basis of how they communicated risk information. And this was some of the work progressed through their Met services and also their NDMO. But, you know, I think, you know, for that effort, it really has to be from led by the community and also founded, you know, through the community. There's also some great work in Cook Islands through, you know, their communities, and I'm sure Director John could elaborate on that in terms of how they translated, you know, some of this risk information into tangible, but also tangible and also usable resilience tools, you know, that are realistic, you know, and that are applicable as well. There are a number of other, you know, initiatives that have put together tools in terms of bridging that gap, you know, through partner as well, with collaboration with NIWA, formerly known as NIWA, but now known as ESNZ. There was the Risk8 tool, which was a risk modeling tool, and that really bridged the gap in terms of bringing together, you know, exposure, your hazard models, and your vulnerability, and being able to look at impact in a manner or in a format that you know, could be shared not only to technical but also to your decision makers and even further down to your community level in terms of dashboards, and also you know, there had been quite a bit of brainstorming with countries in terms of what those information and knowledge products look like. I think that really, I mean, that tool in itself bridges the gap. There are a number of other initiatives, but, you know, I'm happy to continue this conversation, you know, with a separate call, Colleen. But thank you for, you know, pushing out this question, Naka.
Thank you, Orisi, for that, and thank you for addressing Carlene's question on this webinar. We do have one final question to you, Director John, please. So it's from Josephina Chanting, who is based at the Samoa NDMO office. So she's curious to understand the financial resources needed to establish a portal in place like you have for the Cook Islands, and how do you sustain the system? Director Director, apologies. Also, just to note that we're quite out of time at the moment. So if you could just keep your last intervention to less than a couple of minutes, then I'll do the summary. Thank you so much, Director. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question as well. There's a saying, no money, no business. So anyway, thanks very much to SPC and even to NEMA, National Emergency Management of New Zealand agency, who's actually provided support as a donor for us for our geoportal mapping system and so forth. We were able to sweet talk with New Zealand, who work closely with us. It's one of our best donors in terms of our relationship with New Zealand and the Cook Islands, having to ensure that we're able to achieve all our services in doing all this part. Now, you probably ask, how do we do that? To minimize some of the time and cost, especially travels to the outer islands, is an arm and a leg. So we have to go to the Northern Cooks to do these surveys. What we do is that we have trained young members of each island, young entrepreneurs. They're all very good in doing IT. They want to learn to do IT, and they know if you give a phone or a laptop or even an iPhone to them, they will work through that thing in no time. So this is how we start. This is how we started putting it to play to minimize the cost factor by having tablets or iPads shared to each island, and at the same time have connectivity with the internet, that every time they do their service, which is in fact already in their system, and every time they do their service, what we ask them for, they just fill it in the system, and the same thing is picked up by us here in Rarotonga in the main server, and we're able to validate and put them into place. And so that's to avoid travel, time factor. We provide all these to the Pāinua or even around Rarotonga to all our community identified volunteer services. They have all these resources available to them, and they work together with us. It's just a matter of us having a few words. They go ahead to get it done, send it through, and we receive those informations within a matter of short time, rather than doing travels which cost an arm and a leg, as I stated earlier. That's just one of the best ways that we have accommodated. But remember, we train all these youngsters. At the end of the day, that data, that information, is ownership. It's owned by each island. And that's how this one works perfectly for us. And they love it. That's for sure. I can assure you that. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Director. And that's a strong message about ownership and sustainability as well. Thank you again for sharing that. To our listeners who are still with us online, we do apologize. We are 3 minutes over time, but we really wanted to get a few last insights from our speakers here today. So on behalf of the organizing committee, we just like to express our sincere thanks for joining today, for the discussions that have come up today. Thank you so much to those that have sent questions through ahead of time. And thank you so much to those who have been putting comments and questions into the chat box as well. So what we've heard is that risk data isn't just a technical resource, it's a real catalyst for better decisions. Whether it's through peer learning that we saw with Integrate Pacifica, real-time coordination or centralized access to spatial data, the innovations showcased today are really helping planners, responders, and communities act with greater confidence and clarity. You would have seen this across all three interventions. So across all three, again, as we mentioned, the message is clear. When tools are designed with users in mind and supported by these enabling conditions, whether policy, capacity, or coordination, they become powerful drivers of resilience. So we will be looking forward to, as we look forward to event number 3, we'll shift our focus a little bit to look at the demand, uptake, and institutional embedding of risk data and information. How do we ensure these tools aren't just used occasionally, but become essential to how we plan, invest, and protect our communities? So with that, we just like to say, again, thank you very much, Vinaka Vakalevu, for joining our session today. We will be sending an evaluation survey via Google Forms later on today or first thing tomorrow morning. Please, if you could just take the time to help us improve this series moving forward. And again, as mentioned before, the full recording of this session will be shared with everybody within a week, as well as any presentation materials or visual aids to help support the discussions today. But with that, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to our speakers as well. We look forward to seeing you in event 3. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Naka,
Thank you,
again,
Director.
everyone.
Thank you, Orisi.
Naka, Rachel.
Thank you, everyone.
Naka, Director.